At outset, first of all, I would like to say that way back in 1990, my first book had come, which was titled Studies in Medical Anthropology. And I think that was the first book with the title Medical Anthropology in India, if I'm not mistaken. With this title, that was the first book. And coincidentally, that book was edited by me with A. Mahajan. And now it's full circle. Now we have got my co-editor is C. Mahajan. So, and the title of the book is also Medical Anthropology, but only thing is that now it has become Recent Advances in Medical Anthropology. That's the change. So, like I say always, more the things change, more they remain the same. And I think this is a very good example of that. But that's on a lighter note. I think this book is very, very, I think, momentous in the sense that it is talking about health situation of the marginalized section of our society. And medical anthropology, particularly, I would say, of course, medical anthropology is a very, very vast subject. But traditionally and historically, it has been emphasizing upon the healthcare needs, healthcare challenges, healthcare situation of the marginalized communities. And in India particular, I think anthropologists or medical anthropologists have particularly taken care of the healthcare needs and challenges of the scheduled tribes and scheduled castes. And when you're looking at scheduled tribes, I think three things are very, very important for us to understand. One is that they have an enormous burden of communicable disease, infections, tuberculosis, diarrhea, and all these things which are now no more, I think part of the world are still big challenges as well as the scheduled tribe communities. But at the same time, there are certain disease conditions which are specifically located there. Nowhere else. G6PD deficiency, you have sickle cell anemia, which is exclusively endemic in these tribal areas, and many people are dying. And there are a lot of needs are there for which I think anthropologists are doing a great job. And thirdly, unfortunately, the burden of modernization, diseases of modernity are also affected. So they are also having the burden of cancer, they are also having the burden of diabetes, they are also having the burden of hypertension, all kinds of modern diseases of modernity that we also. So what has happened is that whereas the other places, these non-communicable diseases have been replaced by diseases of modernity, here the burden keeps on. So therefore, I was interested in calling the Minister of Tribal Affairs, Sri Arjun Mundaji. Unfortunately, we could not call him, and I wanted him to be here. I wanted him to be here sharing, because I met him very recently, and I found in him a very good intellectual, and a very good person having a great depth of knowledge about anthropology, not only about anthropology, but I think about health care needs of anthropology also. He had a very good understanding of the situations. And in fact, I wanted him to come here, but unfortunately he could not come. So what I would like to say is that way back in 1946, when the Bohr Committee report came, and for India they made a very important suggestion. They said that for a country like India, preventive medicine is the key. It is very, very important. Rather than addressing diseases, if we can prevent them, therefore they paid great emphasis on social and preventive medicine, which was later on called as public health. Even nowadays it is called as community health. And I think that need of like taking care of diseases before they are manifesting themselves. In other words, preventive or community medicines are very, very important. They are key to India's diversity. They are key to India's challenges, which are there because of the lack of resources that we have. We have very few doctors, and even those doctors who are available are located in urban and industrial areas. Not many doctors are there for tribal areas, for forest areas, for villages. We know all that. Now, Government of India, in fact, after 1980s, came up with promotion of Indian systems of medicines. And we know that India has a large resources in the form of Ayurveda, yoga, and Unani, all those kind of resources are there. Government of India rightly, I think, tried to encourage these resources. And therefore, that was another, I think, another very important step that was taken, apart from laying emphasis on preventive medicines, the promotion of Indian systems of medicines. But what I would like to say, I just like to say here, is that yes, we should promote Indian systems of medicines, but we should also take care of the ethno-medical heritage that is available in the villages, in the tribal areas, and should use to the extent possible in the welfare of the people. So just saying that they do not know anything, just saying that they do not have anything would be a wrong statement. Whatever resources they have, we should try to understand what resources they have. These resources should be utilized and then we should supplement these resources from outside. Because I remember, there was a man called Stephen Polgar who said there is a fallacy of empty vessels. And fallacy of empty vessel is that we think that these areas, these tribal areas, the rural areas, they are empty vessels. There is nothing that they have worth. But they do have a lot of traditional knowledge. They do have a lot of traditional medicinal knowledge. And this traditional medicine should be used in a good way. And I think medical anthropology is one subject which teaches how best we can use the traditional resources that are there. And this book is about all these things. And there are of course participants from India, different parts of India, but there are also participants from abroad who have taken part in this particular book. And I would like to thank Concept publishers who were, like even in those great difficult times, they were ready to publish it in time. And of course, I would like to thank all my authors. Sunita Reddy is sitting there, and others are also there. So there are others also in the department. Mitra sahab, aapka hai? Acha, ab dusri kitab. So I would like to thank all the authors of this book. And particularly, I think day and night being spent a lot of labor. I think Dr. Chakravarti Mahajan has worked a lot. I give this owes to you, your hard work, your dedication. Because I am no more now a scholar. I've become an administrator, so I'm busy in this and that thing. But you are the one who hold the fort, and I would like to congratulate you very much for the day like this. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Chairperson Dr. Balram Pani, guest of honor Dr. Suman Kundu, Professor P.C. Doshi, Dr. Chakravarti Mahajan, Dr. Sunita Reddy, colleagues and students. I do not propose to summarize or discuss the contents of the book because that one has to read the book for that purpose. The book offers a cafeteria of topics for anthropologists interested in health to test various dishes or chew and digest few which you like, as per Francis Bacon's classification of books in his essay Horse Studies.
Sorry to interrupt, sir.
Which was published in the year 1598. He was Chief Justice of Britain when Queen Elizabeth I was ruling. Now, according to him, and I quote, crafty men condemn studies, simple men admire them, and wise men use them. And further quote, some books are to be tasted, others to be swallowed, and some few to be chewed and digested. So I propose to discuss some issues or topics given in the book, which I feel like chewing and tasting frequently, and share them with the fraternity. Let us first congratulate Professor P.C. Doshi and Dr. Chakravarti Mahajan for bringing out a comprehensive book on Indian medical anthropology, which provides ground reality of health and disease issues as are faced and managed by people and the health governance mechanisms in India. The book provokes critical thought about the role medical anthropology could play in addressing these issues with a wider vision in new dimensions, widening the scope and advocacy responsibility of anthropology of health in India. Starting with an interesting fable about Akbar Birbal dialogue. Let me come out with that. On being asked to locate the largest professional group in the empire, Birbal came out with the reply, Hakim's Jahapana. On being demanded evidence, Badshah was advised to feign bedridden illness. Citizens made a beeline to wish him well. Every person coming to the bedside of the emperor gave him a piece of advice about the preventive, promotive, and curative aspects of health and disease to keep him fit for a lengthy and creative life. What food to take or avoid, how much rest, fresh air, meditation, entertainment, immunity boosters, whatnot, except drugs. So everybody was a Hakim with information and knowledge and opinions about health and disease. There is no vacuum in the area of health, in disease causation and cure, or about promotion and prevention, unlike the engineering technology or the digital technology, which we have to learn from the institution trained professionals. However, the governance administration brand common people as ignorant, stupid, superstitious in order to advocate disease control programs by way of consumption of drugs as a panacea of all ills. We anthropologists are solicited as social marketing agents to tell the community to comply with the advice about consumption of drugs. I think the term compliance is the most oft repeated term in drug control programs, even in research papers. Now it's often with the term adherence, without which there is a risk of drug resistant bacilli. COVID-19 debates in the media have laid bare the limitations of modern science, with several hypotheses being flashed every day. There is demand for data. What comes out is the macro data, which hides the micro level situation in locality wise tribal, rural, and urban centers, requiring epidemiological analysis. As said, statistics hides more than what it reveals. Now, health understood as an aspect of integrative culture in our functionalist theory and anthropology is now statutorily recognized as a right of the citizen under right of life and thus open to judicial review. It is our agenda to find out how the public, private, and voluntary sector is responding to this constitutional right at the national, regional, and local levels, focusing further on gender and age-specific issues. What kind of ethnography have we been pursuing? No doubt, now ethnomedicine, ethnobotany, ethnopharmacology, etc. are recognized as distinct subdisciplines which could be included in a generic term medical anthropology. In India, during freedom struggle, we were also discussing nature of healthcare to be institutionalized later in independent India through planning and expert committees and pass resolutions at the congresses accordingly. Princely states had patronized medical colleges in Indian systems of medicine. However, following Bohr committee, as mentioned by Professor Doshi, healthcare became a part of community development program through PHC model, primary health center model. Vertical disease control programs were designed to drastically reduce prevalence and incidence of diseases resulting in mortality. In classical anthropology, as mentioned by Foster, the teachers like Kroeber, Herskovits, Lowy consciously kept the students off the applications, while Malinowski advocated practical anthropology. From a paper, Applied Anthropology in Medicine by William Caudill in Anthropology Today, an encyclopedic inventory of 1953, followed by Benjamin de Paul and Margaret Mead in 1955, we have moved forward when primary health care and intersectoral coordination, as also the traditional medicine, assumed significance with Alma-Ata Declaration of 1978. Medical anthropology as a master's level course was already introduced at Pune University in 1974. First time, medical anthropology had a session at Chicago International Anthropology Congress, followed by Delhi in 1978, with a post-Congress medical anthropology symposium at Pune, which was attended by Professor P.C. Joshi and H.K. Bhatt. They subsequently established Society for Indian Medical Anthropology, SIMA. We continue to be comfortable with tribal ethnography or caste peasantry village ethnography using qualitative methods. We continue to study the shamans, herbalists, dais, home remedies as ethnomedicine. Special tribal development blocks with primary health centers headed by MBBS medical officers and sub-centers with trained ANMs reached quite late in tribal areas despite fast growth of allopathic medical colleges. In Maharashtra, even now, the majority of tribal primary health centers are managed by BAMS Ayurvedic doctors with a lower scale of pay and practice allopathy in the government sector. Health being a state subject as per constitution, there are diverse structures of healthcare using plural medical systems in the public sector across the country. In Himachal Pradesh, there are more than 1,000 Ayurvedic health centers against 450 primary health centers. There are parallel systems of Indian systems of medicine and modern medicine in several states like Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh. Chhattisgarh's model of Ayurved Gram has been recommended as Ayush Gram for replication in the 12th five-year plan document. In Maharashtra, with the largest number of Ayush colleges, about 120, half of which are Ayurvedic colleges followed by homeopathic colleges, the director of Ayush is only meant for supervising medical education in the absence of Indian systems of medicine healthcare facilities in the public sector. In Tamil Nadu, naturopathy has gained credibility in government sector thanks to Jayalalitha as chief minister. Papaya leaf juice for dengue from naturopathy has now reached even the five-star multi-specialty hospitals. National Rural Health Mission (NRHM) failed to integrate the various healthcare systems for the benefit of the public. It only resulted in mushrooming of public health schools in India, since earlier one had to go to Harvard for public health. Ayush department, now turned into ministry, initiated studies of ground reality in four states: Himachal, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra with us, followed by National Health Systems Resource Center NHSRC, undertaking such studies in 18 other states under Dr. Ritu Priya from JNU on deputation. Documentation is available in our book, Ayush in Public Health, published by Concept Publishing House in 2016. India has been the only country with two national health policies in 1983 and 2002, now seemingly merged in 2017, trying to use Ayush large manpower for national programs, not necessarily using the ISM knowledge. Under COVID-19, there has been a spurt of Ayush immunoboosters in the market. It requires anthropological insights to study these processes and assess the role of ICMR and Ayush research institutes in public health. I was invited to the world of leprosy control, with the ball of leprosy being shunted between health and social welfare ministries, debating to what extent was it a medical or a social problem. Objectives of leprosy control at WHO were only to diagnose the disease and treat it with drugs. According to them, deformities, which were the main problem with the people, would be preventable if people complied with drug regimen. We were sought to educate the people to comply with the science of treatment of leprosy, while even now they keep on hypothesizing about the mode of transmission because they don't know about it. They more often debate reinfection and relapse in their scientific meetings. It is shocking to know that the word cure is not used in leprosy program. What is used is release from control or release from treatment. That is, in the register they write RFC or RFT. Leprosy is a nerve disease treated by dermatologists who are skin specialists, not by nerve specialists. Research is directed to chemotherapy, not so much to nerve damage, which is people's concern. Leprosy as a medical social problem has educated me about the strengths of medical anthropology and its capacity to influence the people-centric policy to enlist people's active participation in patient care and control activities. Leprosy probably provided leads for the upgradation of socio-behavioral research unit at the ICMR into a research division, now called as Socio-Behavioral Research Forum, under the modified Socio-Behavioral and Health Systems Research Division. The book, Recent Advances in Indian Medical Anthropology, having documented several studies across the country, has happily gone beyond the recent advances in ethnomedicine and medical anthropology to present the vision of direction in which anthropology of health should proceed to play its rightful role in national health policy planning and implementation. We have the strength of analyzing people-centered holistic perspectives and capacity to understand the ground realities and unravel emic perspectives. We may now require focused ethnography to analyze the macro level top-down approach and the process of decision making of the centralized functioning of health bureaucracy. This is happening despite democratic decentralization with 50% reservation for women in the Panchayati Raj, exterminating folk medicine instead of co-opting the indigenous knowledge, as Professor Joshi said, of traditional healers and dyes in public health. Only the pharma industry uses the expertise of our tribal healers to procure medicinal plants from the forest. I think for the first time, mental health has been discussed in medical anthropology book. Despite our theory about culture and personality or basic personality configuration, jointly developed by anthropologists and psychologists, we have our friends in medical college, in the preventive social medicine department and psychiatry departments, several times mentioned by me about a senior psychiatrist telling me that he became prosperous while practicing about abnormal behavior without exactly knowing what was normal behavior. He wanted anthropology to educate him about the patterns of normal behavior. At an earthquake in Latur region of Marathwada, Maharashtra on 30th November 1993, around 4 a.m., 10,000 people perished in a fraction of a second while the houses collapsed on them. As a participant of the ICMR study by Psychiatry Department of BJ Medical College, Pune, we found that the psychiatric problems were far less as compared to such disasters in the West. Community and kinship bonds being strong in India to help each other, coupled with religious discourses on large scale reduced the stress. Normalcy was measured in terms of rebuilding of temples and installing idols of deities and the celebration of marriages. Bhopal carbide gas tragedy study on mental health remained incomplete. Discussion about tribal health in the book in the context of policy issues about tribal development is welcome. With a plethora of national policies on various subjects, national tribal policy as approved by the parliament continues to be absent. Tribal development departments were constituted, separating them from social welfare departments as a single window administration in response to Nehru's Panchashil about tribal administration. On the ground, Tribal Development Department functions as a funding agency to sector departments without authority to monitor or assess their performance about benefits to tribal communities. Area development approach was advocated and not the human development approach. PESA and Forest Rights Act were subsequently enacted. Studies are required on their woeful implementation and impact. We comment about the marginalization of tribal
Parvati
people.
Srikanth ne
We comment about the marginalization of tribal people, but even
bookshop
a lone
Korea
tribal minister,
on this Japan.
even a lone tribal minister in the cabinet is marginalized and pressurized to divert tribal funds for non-tribal development work and to recommend pseudo-tribals to get scheduled tribe status as per Article 342 of the Constitution. In fact, there is a need for tribal health policy, at least in the scheduled areas under 5th schedule of the Constitution. Media keeps on reporting about tribal malnutrition and the strictures passed by the High Courts and Supreme Court, even suo motu injunctions. We were the beneficiary of one such suo motu injunction while an intervention project to develop a model reducing malnutrition was offered by the state government to us, the academic anthropology NGO. The results have influenced the state level policies for developing schemes. This has been documented in a book, Tribal Health and Malnutrition, published by Concept in 2018. It is a matter of introspection for the anthropologists to develop relevant research agenda and about their role in tribal policy formulations. NGOs and CBOs, community-based organizations in tribal areas, would welcome our proactive offers of help in their constructive programs. There are several universities and colleges in tribal belt with large number of tribal students and faculty who do not know about our strengths to address their aspirations. The Anthropological Survey of India does sometimes work to develop useful modules like social impact assessment, but it is not carried forward. There are national level anthropology associations, the Anthropological Society like INCA and now United Indian Anthropology Forum. Anthropologists may not be invited to recommend development paradigms since national political ideologues consider anthropology as a colonial heritage, having been a compulsory subject at the ICS examinations during British rule. Anthropology was removed from the civil services examination after independence, which was restored as an optional subject by the efforts of Professor L.P. Vidyarthi. Ministry of Culture may give an impression of museum mindset of preservation of tribal cultures. Tribal research institutes are either engrossed in ethnographic studies of tribal culture or as apex bodies of scheduled tribe reservation certificates locked in defending their decisions in the law courts. This book, therefore, would be very useful as a reference book to know the ground realities about tribal health and development. It provides food for thought as to how anthropology can play an important role as think tank to address the policy issues about tribal health in the context of plural systems of medicine evolved and statutorily recognized in India. The neglected area of indigenous knowledge and the role that folk medicine or local health traditions and practitioners could play in tribal health care has to be advocated in medical anthropology. Currently, major research remains at the descriptive ethnography level, branded as ethnomedicine. I do not think we need more data on folk medicine. Issue is how to incorporate the knowledge in mainstream public health. Discipline of economics has overshadowed and directs development policy at the macro level, advocating top-down approach, which fails to make a positive impact at the micro level. Health remains narrowed down to disease, drugs, and doctors, with demands for more allopathic medical colleges. Multinational pharma industry plan market strategies for more consumption of drugs in the developing countries. Public health is actually managed on the ground by paramedics in health care and not by doctors. And also in disease control program. Paramedics also manage the disease control programs on ground. I asked the president of Public Health Association, headed by a PhD professor, as to where was the public in public health and where was the health. We find only patients and doctors with pathological reports for diagnosis and treatment. He did not respond. Anthropology understands public as they live their lives and health as an aspect of culture. Good nutrition and diet is expressed through the offerings at rituals, ceremonies, festivals, and hospitality offered to the guests. Vegetable prices on such occasions hike due to supplies falling short of demands. Our small study about what the lady doctors from all systems of medicine, even super specialists, do when they become mothers themselves, reveal as to how they integrate traditional maternity practices monitored by their mothers and mothers-in-law with modern medicine. Even women from Indian diaspora follow the age-old practices about pregnancy care, maternal health, and neonatal and infant care. We need good ethnomedical studies on fish medicine among the fisherfolk communities. Even traditional fish-eating community or caste groups in urban areas know and practice do's and don'ts about fish consumption during pregnancy and lactation. All people see the ground realities, but as anthropologists, we observe them and reflect on them to understand people's perspectives. We say we hear people's impromptu opinions, but we anthropologists, we listen to the people patiently without a paper and pen in interactive dialogues and value their instinctive and insightful quotes, which are, which are full of wisdom. We call it qualitative methods which make us wise. But the bureaucrats want numbers which are dumb. But these numbers are turned into schemes and budgets to end on 31st March every year. It is a challenge we have to meet to prove our strengths through our studies. How do we turn our study into a workable and implementable policy? Let us not underestimate and summarily reject the traditional practices of people about promotion, prevention, and curative knowledge about healthcare. I am sure the book edited by Professor P. Doshi and Dr. Chakravarti will show the insights and promote further research in contemporary medical anthropology or anthropology of health and disease. Let us not forget Birbal's dictum that every citizen is a Hakim. Best luck to contributions in medical anthropology for human well-being. Thank you so much.
Tracing the historical development of the healthcare provisioning in India and further sharing the contributions of various anthropologists, medical anthropology of India and medical anthropology for India, which is more for intervention to better the healthcare in policies and vertical healthcare programs. Looking at the tangible and intangible solutions given by medical anthropologists to some of the health problems which are infectious like leprosy, tuberculosis, and also life-threatening like HIV, to more mundane reproductive health, malnutrition, and vector-borne diseases, despite a good discourse in medical anthropology, a huge disconnect between the research and policy exists because of the lack of interaction between the two, academics and policymakers. The rich heritage and vast knowledge of both codified systems like Ayush and non-codified systems of folk, traditional, little traditions, tribal, indigenous healers, and local health traditions, including the grandma kitchen medicine, are plenty and vast. The flip side is the continued hierarchy which trickled down from biomedicine to Ayushanization to folk healers who are at the bottom of the pyramid, but yet closer to the community, especially marginalized, who cannot afford to pay, and the healers who prefer not to charge, as it is the divine calling, than the super specialty expensive professionals on the top of the pyramid, reachable to only those who can pay in private sector, though the story is different for the vast public healthcare services. Public health, though largely dominated by medicine, anthropologists have contributed immensely to give better understanding of not just medical pluralism, but also with the concepts of illness, sickness, suffering, chronic pain. Professor K.K. Ganguly's paper gives the interface between the anthropology and public health, whereas Dr. Reddy delineates her journey and application of medical anthropology in health. Both the papers emphasize the critical medical anthropology, bringing political economy perspective into the understanding of healthcare as an important development in medical anthropology, moving away from culture-centric descriptive studies in medical anthropology. Professor Subhadra Channa's paper on indigenous medical perspectives also give the relevance of indigenous medicine and the subjectivity in understanding in the perceptions, prognosis, and restoration of health, which is culturally perceived. 4 chapters in part 2 of the book brings out various facets of healing, which brings home the contribution of anthropology as a holistic subject with mindful body, experiences of human existence, as compared to the reductionist view and Cartesian model in biomedicine as mind-body dualism. Focusing on not just the curative aspects of illness, but the whole concept of healing through various mediums are core to the human experience. While the paper by Asaf Sarabi touches upon So Rigpa, traditional healing in Himalayas by the Amchi healers, the mediums and the deep healing through rituals is therapeutic in Himalayas as explored by Abhishek Sharma. As for the Tibetan medicine in Kinnaur of Himachal Pradesh, Bamdev Subedi brings out the plurality of Guruas, Vaidya, Surinyas, in the indigenous healings among the Tharus of the Nepal in Himalayan belt, raises the concerns of vanishing knowledge base unless mainstreamed. The paper by Srila Soren and Professor P.C. Joshi to connect folk medicine to folklore under the non-codified systems of medicine based on the study of Santals as coexisting systems. Part 3 focuses on very important aspect of mental health and well-being in its 5 chapters. Given the low resources in healthcare and particularly low in mental health, needs to look at the plurality in mental health care, especially the contributions made by the healers in dargahs, shrines, religious and spiritual leaders, some of which are covered by the scholars like Ritinder Kaur, Sneha Gupta, Chakravarti Mahajan, Ravindra Singh, and Kirod Moharana's papers in this volume. Ritinder's work on drug de-addiction in Punjab calls for understanding of concept of therapeutic communities and the important role medical anthropologists can play to renovate the concept of addiction and its management. C. Mahajan's work in mental health aspects of conflict zone of Kashmir ask for local patterns of distress which are contextualized, especially political context and the perpetual presence of military. Ravinder Singh's paper combine the biomedicine and religious healing as dawa and dua are the potent combination for mental health and healing. However, raises the over-medicalization in today's context due to the hegemonic, powerful presence of pharmaceutical industries, in this case, antipsychotic and antidepressant drugs. Kirod's paper advocates for ethnography as a method to study mental health, given its sensitivity and personal nature of the problem, and also to capture lived experiences and social sufferings framework. These papers have looked into the mental illness from empirical and ethnographic studies, which could not have been captured otherwise with any other method. Part 4 focuses on gender aspects of health and healing. Shrishti Bhatnagar focused on menstrual health, which was a taboo subject till few years back, shrouded in the construct of purity and pollution, with a culture of silence around it, where menstruating body is seen as pathological, shameful, needs to be broken down, these cultural taboos to improve women's reproductive health. Thankfully, which is being broken in the past few years with the women's movement and emphasis on gender studies, the well-being of women is spoken about even through films like Padman, Toilet A Prem Katha, to highlight gender issues. Priyanka Ghosh and Matthew Josh's paper on pathways of decision-making in childbirth, where the authors looks at the social context of biomedicine practice and the powerful imposition of gynecologists according to their convenience to the decision-making and technocentric settings of quote-unquote delivery of the baby, where the mother is left with no choice of, again, quote-unquote birth. Gunjan Arora's paper on body and embodiment of listening to one's own body from an emic perspective to understand the lived experiences and rational choice made by the individuals from gender perspective is very pertinent and calls for focusing on biological events from cultural lens. Ashwin Tripathi's paper takes you to the Indian migrants in Belfast and special healthcare and experiences of elderly Indian migrants, especially from the perspective of the intergenerational caregivers with the changing cultural expectations, modern technologies, and virtual caring. These are the new frontiers in the medical anthropological studies, which are far and few, ending with yet another chapter by Drabita Datta on the Bhosla, a metal handicraft craftsman occupational workspace, and health risks and problems faced by the artisans. The final part of the book brings out the medical pluralism and policy issues to the forefront. The paper by Avni Khatri and A.K. Sinha decodes the medical pluralism, keeping in view of the politics and economics of care. Gurinder Kaur and Sukhbir Singh, on the other hand, looks at the medical pluralism, continuity and change in Himachal Pradesh. Ravin Srivastava's paper, on the other hand, looks at the healthcare providers, especially women's health workers in North India, who are the crucial part of the whole healthcare service system. The final paper by Prashant Khatri and Professor P.C. Joshi sums up the institutional response to tribal health from public policy perspectives, bringing in very important concept of empathy. Though last 3 decades, medical anthropology emerged as most sought after sub-branch within the anthropology world over, and medical anthropology field in the Indian context has just started. It has a huge potential for and in health, well-being, and public health discourse. For achieving universal health coverage, we need to recognize, integrate mainstream traditional healing systems too. This edited volume is an excellent edition in the field of medical anthropology. It gives directions for the younger scholars to research in various health settings. It's a wake-up call to revive indigenous healing systems, further an affirmation and declaration to the policymakers about the importance of anthropologists in the field of health and well-being. Thank you.
A very good morning to the August gathering here and everyone present virtually. Thank you, Dr. Avitoli, for that rather generous introduction. Respected Vice Chancellor, Professor Joshi, Professor Balram Pani, our Registrar, Dr. Vikas Gupta, and all my teammates in administration who are all here, colleagues from anthropology department, teachers and students. It's really a pleasure for me to be present here, though as per past practice, I was slightly late in coming, and also to speak a few words on the book. Dr. Singh is smiling when I said I was late, but anyway, I came in time. It gives me immense pleasure I was reading this book, I just got it now, and I was reading this book right away and made some notes as well. Thank you, Dr. Mutatkar and Dr. Reddy, for a wonderful perspective, kind of a review of the book. I am an outsider, not an anthropologist, but I'm still a biochemist and work in the areas of biomedicine, focusing on cardiovascular diseases and sickle cell diseases. So I'm close by. And I must say, I'm very happy that this book is released today, because I have been working with sir for over more than a year. And one of the advantages was that I also got to learn a little bit of anthropology. Time to time, he has narrated several incidents, and I got to read some of his writings a couple of months back when he wrote one piece on why anthropology is not going to the international level with theories and great findings. That was wonderful time to me, and I've always maintained, and I spoke about this in the Department of Anthropology as well, that sir has been such a good administrator. One of the reasons probably because he studies anthropology, so he understands human psychology and human behavior and how to handle all that very well. He, as we have heard again and again, has worked in the area of medical anthropology and have given a lot of contributions in the book. And I know that this book is very exciting, and I think I can read this book in a couple of hours. I got this piece right now as I go back. And he has given a very wide perspective, in very brief paragraphs, I could say. So it doesn't distract you from the focus. And several broad terms that he included from theoretical knowledge. And as we all know, medical anthropology spans from evolution, ecology of diseases to international health, nutrition, so on and so forth. And on practical grounds, anthropologists work in the area of community medicine, public health, healthcare delivery, mental health, medical activism, so on and so forth. And this book kind of gives a wide perspective into the area. And I'm sure I welcome you all to read this book. We'll get an idea about medical anthropology in brief. And then anyone who is interested can pick up specific areas and then follow it through. And it talks about various issues. What especially attracted me was the focus on indigenous medical perspectives against Western medicine. To an extent, I follow Western medicine. I practice Western medicine. I design drugs, which are small molecules. But since I was influenced by Sir, I have moved on a little bit and moved on to herbs and traditional medicine. And I forgot to tell you, Sir, I just published a paper in phytomedicine which focused on herbal remedies and their mechanisms, because mostly we tend to keep herbal medicines away, saying that the mechanisms are not known. But when we went through the literature, there's a lot of literature mechanism already known. And we also believe that plant products are usually safe, but there are instances where they're actually not safe. So we all put that. So it's thanks to your influence. And this book also talks about and various modes of healing. Sir has touched upon from Himalayas to Tibetan remedies, to Himachal Pradesh, Kashmir, where he has, brought in how militarization has affected mental health. Tharu's folk medicine, Santhal medicine, Assam, we're talking about craftsmen, everything. It's a broad perspective. What I only felt was that, I don't know, I have not seen the traditional or modes of healing in South India may not be touched as much, but the entire thing is there. And it talks about mental health and well-being. We have all seen how important it is, especially during the pandemic. There are sections on addiction, and there are also sections on national policies and IPR issues. The neem oil case has been brought here as an issue. So, and medical anthropology is very interdisciplinary in nature. It even talks about environmental pollutions to eradicating disease at various levels. So this is a wonderful book, and I thank you very much for giving this book to us. And it will go into various libraries, I believe, and students will greatly benefit from this. Thank you so much, sir, for doing this as a wonderful service. And I must also thank the co-author, Chakravarti Mahajan. I learned you had wrote a book in 1990 with A. Mahajan and now another with C. Mahajan. And I hope you will continue this good work, in various ways. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be present here. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Avitali. You can take it.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Avitali, for nice introduction. And good afternoon to you all. Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, Professor P.C. Joshi, and my team, and dear colleagues and student friends. And this is all about the recent advances in Indian medical anthropology. And whenever, means all the panelists and whatever I know, means it is to me that is the relationship between the human and the other species that will affect the health condition of the individual. And as Professor Joshi said that, okay, it is the community as a whole, and it will has certain impact on the environment also. Because I'm from the environmental science, I know that it has certain impact on the environment. And this book has been well designed, means that is in the 5 groups. 5 groups is the first one, it is the disciplinary practices and knowledge production. Means whenever anything, if you want to say, if you have the better knowledge about that one, if you don't have the knowledge about what are the productions and how to move and where to move and what to do, what not to do, then you cannot move anywhere else. So first of all, the knowledge production, it is quite necessary. And that's why it was very well designed. It is the disciplinary practices and the knowledge production. So you have the better knowledge so that you can decide your way in which direction you will go. And the second chapter, it is the modes of healing. Means in India, there are thousands of modes of healing. Means that you can say homeopathy, allopathy, and hydropathy, means many things. But here you have emphasized that it is the local or indigenous. Means I'm from Odisha and I know I'm in the tribal belts. There are many indigenous and the local diseases. And that these local diseases can be cured by they know that what type of medicines they can use so that they can cure themselves. So that type of knowledge they should have, and that modes of healing, then means that we have to extract from them and then spread on the other one. And as Professor Joshi had said that it is not only restricted to the tribal areas, it is the marginalized sectors. Means in the many states, there are poor fellows in the marginalized and the rural belts. They are not getting also the better opportunity. And here, means whenever this indigenous or the local medicine practices will be coming forward, then definitely it will help them. And here in the last, you have said that the policy issues. Means if you will do something, and if you will not help to the society and the country, then it is useless. Means here the policy making. Means if you have some knowledge, and we have visited many rural belts or tribal areas, and we have done something in research, means we should make it in such a manner so that it will help in the policy making. And these policy issues, and they will discuss, and it will help to make policies so that the local people and the tribal people will be benefited. And there are many local medicines. For example, I'm telling you, there is the one flower, means it is the, whenever you will consume it, it will immediately, means it is the, in case of the Mizoram, one flower here you will consume it directly, then diabetic it will be coming down immediately. But the preservation time, means the lifetime of that flower, it is only 3 to 4 hours. Means you will have that knowledge, because that tribal areas people, they know that what is the lifetime of this flower and how to preserve it. Means now, right now, means the anthropologist and the scientists, those who are moving that area, and they are collecting that flowers, and they take some mechanism so to preserve that flower, so that that can be used. Means this type of knowledge, means that will make us how to design the policy so that we can reach to the remote areas. And almost all the panelists, they have talked about all the indigenous medicine and the community health. And these are, means particularly whenever you will talk about the anthropology, these diseases or the cure, it is based purely on the cultural specific, habitat specific, food habits, because they don't have such type of food habits, those who are in the rural belt or the urban areas. So food habits are quite totally different. So how, means these diseases are based on that one. So that's why, means whenever there is the, means Sarah said that okay, it is that the local indigenous cure system, it is there, because they know that the food habit, based on the food habit, they have developed their own mechanism. So that mechanism has to be taken out, and that will be spread in large scale so that research can be done. And I think this book will help to the research scholars and all those who will read this book. They can get some material and do some research work. There are 5 fields, means they have already indicated. And in the specific field, if somebody wants to do the research work, it is a greater opportunity to move in that direction. So I'm thankful that you have invited me for this program, for the book release program. And again, I wish you all the best. This book is definitely going to be very successful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Always a pleasure listening to you, sir. Well, we have come towards the end of the event, and I would like to request the co-editor, Dr. Chakravati Mahajan, very young but promising faculty member from our department, to deliver a lot of thanks from here.
Thank you, Dr. Vitoli. Professor Joshi, Professor Pani, Professor Kundu, Dr. Gupta, Professor Ratnavali, Professor Mutatkar, Dr. Reddy, all my colleagues from the department, all the guests, students, ladies and gentlemen, people present online. It is in fact a very pleasant duty that I'm performing. In editing this volume of essays, we have incurred a huge debt of gratitude to 23 contributors spread across country and abroad, whose diligence, competency, and professionalism have made what is undeniably a challenging task a learning venture. We are also indebted to a number of people, too many to mention individually. However, following people deserve special mention, and these were the people who reviewed all these papers for us. Professor V.V. Sharma from University of Hyderabad, Professor Abhig Ghosh from Punjab University, Chandigarh, Dr. Gunjan Arora from JNU, and Dr. Nilisha Vishisht from University College London. I'm also thankful to my research scholars, Rashmi Patel, Shubhrodip Pathak, and Krishnakant Yadav for their assistance in the preparation of this manuscript. Thank you everyone for joining us today.